Mr. Owen, I wanted to ask you, I heard previously you had mentioned that that states really can't shoulder the burden of some of this responsibility, that only the federal government has the resources to do that. I was puzzled by that because that's not, from my experience, the case. From our state's perspective, the EPA is really leaning on the state to do all of the work and shoulder all of the burden in enforcing their regulations.
Let me clarify the answer. What I'm saying is it's very hard for states to do it alone. In the same way that, as you just mentioned, it's really hard for the federal government to do it alone. And the system set up by the Clean Water Act is designed to be a partnership within areas where there is federal jurisdiction under the statute, but that there's also state authority. And I think the other point I would make is that that partnership has generally worked really well, where you have federal authority delegated to states, states acting with federal support and all working on a joint project of trying to advance water quality. And so the fear I was expressing is that when the federal government pulls back, the partnership goes away. And now the states still have the authority to act, but that would mean, in some cases, enacting new legislation, staffing up the effort, gaining experience. And so that's challenging. That's where the difficulty lies.
So certainly you can understand that the water issues in the Midwest are different than the issues in your state of California. Do you feel that the federal government creating a one-size-fits-all solution is appropriate, or do you believe that the states should have more control?
So I think calling it a one-size-fits-all solution is not quite right, because there is some flexibility in the regulatory language that allows it to be adapted to the different circumstances of different places. That flexibility also leaves more room for interpretation, which is I think the fear that we're hearing from the rest of the panel.
Certainly, you've heard from some of the testimony from the farming community of the impact that they have. Do you sympathize or understand or share any of those concerns? Have you ever been on a farm or worked on a farm, tried to produce food to feed anyone?
So I have tried to produce food. I've gardened. I'm bad at it. So it was not a very successful effort, but I have made the attempt, and I have spent time on farms. I have not been employed on one ever,
Okay.
but so to your question, do I sympathize? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think everybody on this panel would agree that water quality is important. I think everyone on this panel would agree that economic development is important, and everybody would agree that producing food, that producing housing, that all of these things really matter.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ong. Mr. Hawkins, I appreciate you being here today. I wanted to get an idea. Whenever I was campaigning, I heard everywhere the impact of the supply chain on farming, the impact of energy costs, fertilizer costs, the impact of fuel costs. And I think my question to you is this the appropriate time to saddle the farming community with these regulations?
Well, Congressman, thank you. Thank you for the question. I'd say there's never a good time to saddle agriculture or any sector of the economy with uncertain regulatory requirements. Congressman, as we think through this issue, as we think through the regulatory process alone, if a farmer is subject to a permit and must go through it, that's one thing. There's cost associated with that permit, of hiring the experts that are needed to help get you through the process. There are costs associated with mitigation, and there's cost associated with the time that it takes to ultimately see your project through fruition on the farm as a result of the permit. But I'd also say you have the uncertainty that's associated with compliance and the threat of potential civil or criminal penalties.
I understand the cost could be anywhere from $10,900 to $2.4 million.
That's a lot of money, Congressman.
Right. The impact of a Missouri farming family, what are the average size of the family farms or the farming operations in Missouri?
Yeah, so the average size farm in Missouri would be about 300 acres. But again, Missouri, we kind of represent the diversity of American agriculture. We do everything but really citrus and sugar.
Yeah.
But we truly are a melting pot when it comes to just diversity of production.
So I imagine, I mean, that would be a huge impact to any family farmers. Thank you. My time has expired.